All right, moving on to the chapter 3 in our workbook, and we're going to start with metric staircase. Um, so hopefully you enjoyed the video from mathematics from our last day. I thought it was a really good summary of where the metric system comes from, why it's there, and some of the basic ideas of it. Out of that, you saw this sort of graphic here about kilometers, hectometers, decameters, meters, and how the largest is the kilometers and the smallest is the millimeters. You can rewrite that as a staircase. And the reason this is a great visual is if you're going from one unit to the other, if you're going down the staircase, you're going to go times 10. And if you're going up the staircase, you're going to divide by 11, or divide by 10, excuse me. The higher the numbers, of course, are higher up here on the staircase, which means if you go down to these, you need more of these to equal one big thing. You'll need a lot more centimeters to get a bunch of kilometers. All right. So when you're going down the staircase, you need more centimeters, so you do multiplying. And when you're going up the staircase, you need less of them, and so you'd be dividing. In particular, if you're looking at the meters and the kilometers and centimeters that we're going to be looking at for this video, you see that your base unit is meters, and as you go down here, you get smaller units of decimeters, centimeters, and millimeters, and then decameters, hectometers, and kilometers, and going up the staircase that way. This is one you might want to keep handy. You could copy it in the back of your workbook if you wanted, because it's a very, very handy tool. We're going to use it a couple times in this video. All right, but let's go to our workbook, and we're going to start on page 58. And we're going to do a couple pages today because the questions sort of go by really quickly. On page 58, what I'm most interested in is question 2 and 3, the multiplying by 10 and dividing by 10. If you recall, at the beginning of chapter 2, that's what we did. We were multiplying and dividing by 10. So let's remind us how to do that. So if you're calculating and you want to do 0.19 times 10, remember when you multiply by 10, you move the decimal place one decimal place to the right. So let's just check and see what that gets us. So 0.19 times 10. And sure enough, it's what we expected. It moves one decimal place to the right, and we get 1.9. Now, if we're multiplying by 100, we're going to move two decimal places to the right. Okay, that's 10 times bigger. So let's just double check that. So 0.19 times 100, we should move two decimal places to the left. So there we go, 1, 2, and we get 19. And then, of course, we're multiplying by 1,000. You're going to move three decimal places, 1, 2, and the third one's going to get a 0, and you get 190. But so multiplying is like going down the staircase. You need more of them. So you multiply by 10 would be 1 or 2 or 3 decimal places to the right. When you divide, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to go and move decimal places to the left. Now, dividing by 1 does nothing. When you divide by 1, it's just multiplied by itself is 312. So it's going to be the same thing as dividing by 1. But when you're dividing by 10, you're going to move one decimal place to the left. So the decimal place is right here after the 2. So if we move one decimal place to the left, it should be 31.2. Let's verify that on our calculator. 312 divided by 10 moves us one decimal place to the left. And sure enough, there we go, 31.2. And if we're going to divide by 100, then we're going to, of course, move two decimal places. 1, 2, and you see we get to 3.12. The number of places we move depends on the number of zeros. You see there's no 0 here, so we don't move any. 1 0, we're going to move one decimal place. And 2 zeros, we're going to move two decimal places. Okay, so that's going to be really handy because we're going to be multiplying and dividing by 10 when we're talking about moving from metric system. All right, next is at the bottom of that page is converting between metric using. So here's a diagram of a rule that we're going to use, and it's cut into 6 centimeters. Now, what I want to stress is that this diagram is not to actual size. From here to here is not 6 centimeters. Definitely not in your workbook, and definitely not on the screen, I imagine. Okay, but this is just a representation of what's going on. All right, so it asks how many subdivisions is each centimeter broken into. So you see there's the unit right there, centimeters. So this is 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeters. So how many divisions are it broken into? So we can see the little ticks in each centimeter, and we can count them. So there's 1 tick, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each centimeter is broken up into 10 subdivisions. And we should remember from our stepladder that that means that it is, those smaller units are millimeters. We can go back and we can see that centimeters, if we go 10, divide by 10 or multiply by 10, we get it broken up into 10 millimeters. So 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters. Okay? So here we see that it's broken up by 10 and we're talking millimeters. What's the abbreviation for millimeters? Well, you just saw it there is mm, millimeters. What fraction of a centimeter is 1 millimeter? Well, 1 millimeter is right here, and that is 1/10 of a centimeter. And 1/10, if we punch that in our calculator, is 0.1, which is going to move 1 decimal place to the left. Okay, so just like we expected. So there's our ruler, and we can use our ruler to do all sorts of different measurements. But first, we've got to make sure we know how to read the ruler. And I think you've had lots of practice doing this in the past, but let's just quickly check. So the arrow P is pointing at this notch right here, the 3. So of course it's in centimeters, so there's 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, so the P point is pointing right at 3 centimeters. It says this is the same as how many millimeters? Well, we could actually count them. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 20, 30. Okay, but I think we know that if there's 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter, then that's 10, 20, 30. You multiply it by 3, we're going to get 30 millimeters. All right, Q is asking for a different point, and it's asking for it in millimeters. So again, we could start here and start counting, but we can count by tens to get up to close point. So this is 10, 20, 30, 40 millimeters. And then how many more notches? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 45. And then one more makes 46. So we're sitting at the 46 millimeters. Not quite 50, which would be 5 centimeters. Well, there's 45 millimeters is right here, so we're 1 bigger is 46. So how many centimeters is that? Well, if we went from centimeters to millimeters, we multiplied. So if we're going from millimeters to centimeters, we're going to divide. We're going to divide by 10. So we could check our calculator, but I think we'll be able to figure this out. So it's 46 divided by 10 is 4.6. Now you can, what's nice about the metric system is you can actually see that. That's 4 centimeters and then 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0.6 of a centimeter. And so it's just 4.6. So understanding how to read the ruler is going to be very helpful and will allow us to move on and do some other measurements in a second. Going back and forth between centimeters and millimeters is a really handy tool. They have this nice little graphic here that reminds you when you go from millimeters to centimeters, you have to divide, or going from centimeters to millimeters, you're going to divide or multiply. But I'm going to just remind us of our staircase because it's a great, I think, a better representation. So if we're going from centimeters down to millimeters, we're going to multiply by 10, which is what this first question is saying. You have 4.1 centimeters. If we're going to millimeters and we're going down one staircase, so we're going to multiply by 10. So we can do that calculation on our calculator. We can go 4.1 times 10, but from all the warm up and the practice, we know multiplying by 10 just moves 1 decimal place to the right. So I don't think we need our calculator for that to get that it's 41. Here it says how many centimeters in millimeters. Well, you can really see that right from this. So I'm going to suggest that you go from here and do this part right away. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that so you can see it in red. Because the 4 in 4.1 represents the 4 centimeters and the 0.1 represents the millimeters. So this little part right here is the millimeters. And so you can read the 4 centimeters and then the 1 millimeter. Okay? So I would say let's do that part first and then convert from millimeters to centimeters or vice versa. So looking at our next one then, 3 centimeters and 7 millimeters, well, that's going to be 3.7 centimeters. And then if we're going to multiply by 10 to get millimeters, move this decimal place once, and we'll get 37 millimeters. Finally, if I've got 86 millimeters, so 80 of those make up 8 centimeters, and the 6 is 0.6 centimeters. So we're going the opposite way now. So we're going from millimeters to centimeters. So the staircase tells me to divide. So let's just double check that. 86 divided by 10. Well, of course, dividing by 10 means we move the decimal place one decimal place over, and we get 8.6. And then 8.6 translates really nicely into 8 centimeters and 6 millimeters. All right, so I'd like you to push pause on the video for now and just quickly fill in the rest of this chart and then come back and see how you did. Okay, so 10 centimeters and 5 millimeters. I'm going to convert that to centimeters right now as 10.5. Multiplying by 10 will get us to millimeters, so we move our decimal place one decimal place over. That's going to be 105 millimeters. If we start with 14.4 and we're going to millimeters, we're going to move the decimal place one decimal place over there to get 144 millimeters. And of course, the 14.4 means 14 centimeters and 4 millimeters. And finally, the 132 millimeters, if we convert into centimeters, you're going to divide by 10, so you're going to move the decimal place one decimal place to the left to get 13.2. And then, of course, the 13.2 translates to 13 centimeters and 2 millimeters. So hopefully you were able to get those last three correct. Number 5, circle the best measurement, the width of this book. So do you think it makes sense to talk 20 millimeters or 20 centimeters when we're talking about how wide the book is? Well, 20 millimeters is very small, so I think 20 centimeters is a better estimate. The length of a calculator. So we all depends on what size calculator we have, but 12 millimeters is so tiny. Just think about how tiny that is. So I think it makes more sense to be in centimeters. The thickness of a dime. Now that is a tiny measurement, how thick a dime is. And that's approximately 1 millimeter, not 1 centimeter, that'd be way too thick. And the width of a fingernail, okay, so how wide is your fingernail? Well, it's not 1 millimeter, it's probably closer to 1 centimeter. All right, so that's just getting comfortable between the difference between centimeters and millimeters. All right, let's turn the page, and we're now on page 60. And we're actually going to use a ruler, to go off and measure the length of these lines. So if you have a ruler close by, that will be very handy. You can grab it, push pause in the video and grab it. I actually got one right here. And this one is scaled purposely so it matches our graph. So you can see here I've got centimeters on the top and it's broken up into the 10 notches. So I'm going to use it to measure the length of this ruler. So there's a little warning there. It says sometimes there's a space between the end of our ruler and the 0 mark. So you don't put the end of the ruler at the end of your line. You have to put the 0 mark. So I'm going to put it right about there. And you can see that it goes just past the 10.5. It goes to 22.6. So I'll just move it underneath here so I can see it a little better. So that's 2 centimeters, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then one more makes 6. So 2.6 centimeters are 26 millimeters. Let's use that same ruler and we'll put it right here. Okay, and we see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters, and then 2 little ticks is 4.2 centimeters then. Or multiply that by 10, and you can count them up. 10, 20, 30, 40, and 1, 2 is 42 millimeters. Okay, so if you've got a ruler there, I'll let you go off and try the rest of these. And then you can push pause on the videos to come back and see if you got the right answer. Okay, so let's hopefully you see if you got the right answer. I think this next one, I've got it at 0.8, so we're not quite at 1 centimeter. I think we're at the 8 millimeter mark. So there's 5, 6, 7, 8. You might say 0.7. It's really tough to see when we get so small. But that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 millimeters. The next one is fairly big, And I think it goes right to the 7 centimeter mark. So I'm going to say exactly 7 centimeters. In millimeters, that would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 millimeters. E, I think we have it at 5.3. Okay, just move it back just a little bit. There, 5.3 or 53 millimeters. And then I measured the last one at 3 centimeters. Looks like it's right bang on that. And that would be 10, 20, 30 millimeters. Okay, so hopefully you got those same measurements. 1 meter equals how many centimeters? Well, we could bring out our staircase again, but remember, 1 meter is 100 centimeters. And then if you're multiplying that, or if you're talking about in millimeters, you're going to multiply that by 10. So we've got 100 times 10 is going to get to 1,000, and that's 1,000 millimeters. It's the length of a meter. And a meter, think about that, a meter stick, you've seen them in the classrooms. That's 100 centimeters or 1,000 meters. What fraction of a meter is a centimeter? Well, if there's 100 centimeters in a meter, then 1 centimeter would be 1/100th. And if you wrote that as a decimal, you can punch that in your calculator and see that it's 0.01. Think of it as dollars and cents. This is the beauty of the metric system, is it's very similar to that. That's like 1 penny out of 100 pennies that are necessary for $1. So if you think of the meter as $1, and then a centimeter would be a penny. And so it's 0.01 dollars is how many 1 penny would be. So 1 centimeter is 0.01 millimeters. All right, great. We're trucking along really nicely here. We're going to skip the number 8 because it goes off and asks you to measure things in your classroom. And since we're not in our classroom, we're going to skip that, which means we're going to quickly get to our last page in section 2.3, or sorry, 3.1, sorry. And we're almost finished. So now we're on page 61, and we're talking about bigger distances like kilometers and meters. So for example, if you run one length of a soccer field is exactly 100 meters long. Okay, 100 meters long is a soccer field. It's a little bit different than a football field. Football field is measured in yards, okay, and this is in meters. So we're slightly different, okay? They're just slightly different sizes. But if you run one soccer field, it's 100 meters. So if you ran one soccer field and there was another one right next to it, you ran 2 of them, you would be running 200 meters. And then if you run 10, well, if each one is 100, then that's 1,000 meters. And if you recall, what's 1,000 meters? Well, there's 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So if you're trying to imagine how far a kilometer is, a great way to estimate that in your head is that it's exactly 10 soccer fields. Okay, it's very close to 10 football fields too. But imagine that's our soccer field out on the back field at school. If you walked 10 of those in a row, you've walked a kilometer. And the unit measurements for that is km. All right, then we go to our last thing, is going from meters to kilometers. So we're going to look at our staircase again. So we've got meters here in the middle and kilometers up here. So if I'm going to go from kilometers to meters, I need to go down steps 1, 2, 3, times 10, times 10, times 10. Well, what is times 10 3 times? So let's take 1 times 10 times 10 times 10. And that is 1,000, which is exactly what we thought. 1 meter is 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. All right, so 1, 2, 3 steps. You're going to move your decimal place 3 points as well. Now, if you're going from meters to kilometers, you're going to do the same thing, but you'll divide. And you'll divide 1, 2, 3, and you move your decimal place 3 spots to the left. So if you're going from meters to kilometers, you're going to need to divide by 100. You see you're going up the staircase, so you need smaller numbers. And if you're going from if you're going from kilometers to meters, then you're going to have to times by 1,000 because there's a lot more meters in a kilometer. So the first one's done for us. Speed skating, we have 1,500 meters. If you're going to go to kilometers, then we're dividing by 1,000. Let's just check that in our calculator then. So 1,500 divided by 1,000 equals 1.5. And of course, the way we know that is we're going to move 1, 2, 3 decimal places to the left. All right, so that process will allow you to get the answer really quickly, even without our calculator. So let's try right here. If we're going to move 3 decimal places to the left, 1, 2, 3, then there'll be 5.0. Let's check. 5,000 meters. Well, if there's 1,000 meters in each kilometer, then we must get 5 kilometers. Good. How about 20? Well, we're going to move 3 decimal places. So 1, 2, and we need to move 1 more to get a 0. So there's going to be, oh, sorry, we're moving from kilometers to meters. I'm going the wrong way. Kilometers, there's 1,000 meters in every kilometers. So we're going to have to multiply. See, we're going to multiply. So we're going to move 3 decimal places this way. 1, 2, 3. That means we're going to have to add 3 zeros to that. Let's check our math. 20 times 100 gets us, oh, not 100, 1,000. 20 times 1,000 meters in each kilometer is 20,000 meters. Here's where we're dividing. So we're going to divide 3 times. 1, 2, 3 to get 0.5. Again, I'd like you to pause and try the last 4 on your own. All right, let's see. 12,000 meters. We're going to move 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So that's 12 kilometers. 10 kilometers. We're going to have to multiply by 1,000. Well, I think if 20 kilometers is 20,000, I bet you this is 10,000. Yes, it is. 1, 2, 3. We need to add 3 zeros on there. 7.5 multiplied by 1, 2, 3 is 7,500. And finally, going from 400 meters to kilometers, we're going to have to divide by 100. So we're going to move the decimal place 3 decimal places to the left. 1, 2, 3, and we'll get 0.4 kilometers. All right. So the only last thing is at the bottom is your check your understanding. It says when you convert between metric and units, the digits remain the same, only the decimals disappear. Well, that's exactly what we were just doing. And this dare case is a really good explanation. But we know from what we were doing in last unit and from practicing it today that multiplying and dividing by 10 moves the decimal place. All right, so if you're multiplying, you're going to move the decimal places to the right. If you're dividing, you're going to move it to the left. And just depending on how far you go is depending on how many units you're going. All right, so that's all for today, and really good job. We've finished everything from section 3.1, and we're done for today. Thanks.